America is $36 trillion in debt, a number so large it barely feels real, yet every dollar is owed to someone. Many people point to China as the main lender, and it's true that China holds roughly $750 billion of U.S. debt. But China itself is buried under debt too, with more than $18 trillion of its own obligations. Much of that Chinese debt is held by Chinese banks, and those same banks also own American government bonds. At the same time, American banks hold Chinese debt, European debt, and debt from nearly every major economy. The deeper you look, the more tangled the system becomes. Every country is borrowing, every country is lending, and together the world now carries more than $300 trillion in total debt, nearly 3 times the size of the entire global economy. That raises a simple but unsettling question. If everyone is in debt, who is actually getting paid? The answer reveals something deeper. The modern global economy is not built on stability, but on constant motion, a never-ending cycle of borrowing, lending, and reinvesting. Debt is not a side effect of the system, it is the engine that keeps it running. Debt may sound like a modern problem, but it is one of the oldest ideas in human history. Long before banks or money existed, debt was simply a promise. A farmer might lend grain in the spring and be repaid after harvest, sometimes with a little extra. No contracts, no interest rates, just trust. At its core, debt is borrowing from the future to solve a problem today. Over time, simple loans evolved into something much larger. Kings wanted castles, empires wanted ships, but no single lender could afford the cost. In the 17th century, England faced this problem while preparing for war. Instead of raising taxes, the government sold pieces of debt to the public in exchange for cash. These were bonds, written promises to repay with interest. This innovation changed everything. Governments could now raise massive sums of money without emptying their treasuries. By the 20th century, bonds went global. World wars forced nations to borrow at unprecedented levels, not just to fight, but to rebuild. In 1944, the Bretton Woods system made the US dollar the center of global finance, tying other currencies to the dollar and the dollar to gold. But gold was limited, and economies kept growing. In 1971, the United States abandoned the gold standard, turning money into fiat currency backed only by government trust. From that moment, borrowing exploded. Governments learned that debt could fuel growth, not just survive emergencies. Roads were built, schools were funded, recessions were softened, all with borrowed money. Today, global debt exceeds $300 trillion. To understand that scale, a stack of $1 million would reach the height of a tall building. $1 billion would reach the edge of space. $300 trillion would stretch to the moon and back dozens of times. So who actually holds all this debt? To understand that, look at the United States. Roughly 70% of U.S. government debt is owed to Americans themselves. The government borrows money by issuing bonds, and those bonds are bought by banks, pension funds, insurance companies, and investors. When you deposit money in a bank, it does not sit idle. Banks invest it, lend it, and buy government bonds. U.S. banks alone hold nearly $2 trillion in treasury bonds. Pension funds invest heavily in bonds to generate safe returns for retirees. Insurance companies do the same to protect long-term payouts. This creates a hidden network where people's savings become loans to the government. When the government pays interest, that money flows back to lenders, who then reinvest it, often by buying more bonds. This creates a self-reinforcing loop where money continuously cycles through the system. The same process happens globally. Foreign governments and banks hold about 30% of U.S. debt, while their own debt is held by others in return. Japanese savings fund European loans. European savings flow into American bonds, and the cycle continues. Governments rarely pay off debt completely. Instead, they borrow new debt to replace old debt. This may sound reckless, but it is the foundation of the modern economy. Debt fuels growth. When governments spend borrowed money, businesses earn more, workers get paid, and consumption increases. If borrowing suddenly stopped, spending would collapse, jobs would disappear, and economies would shrink. Greece experienced this after the financial crisis when investors stopped lending. Public workers were fired, wages collapsed, and the economy shrank by a quarter. Governments know this, which is why borrowing continues. In crises like COVID-19, borrowing becomes unavoidable. In 2020, the U.S. borrowed nearly $4 trillion in a single year to keep the economy alive. But borrowing comes with risks. As debt grows, interest payments consume more of the budget, leaving less money for schools, hospitals, and infrastructure. When borrowing becomes expensive, governments may print money to cover costs. This can lead to inflation, where prices rise and savings lose value. In extreme cases like Venezuela, excessive money printing destroyed the currency entirely. Even moderate inflation weakens trust and raises borrowing costs. For developing nations that borrow in foreign currencies, a weakening local currency makes debt harder to repay, increasing the risk of default. When confidence breaks, investors demand higher interest rates or stop lending altogether. Defaults follow, shutting countries out of financial markets. When systems built on debt begin to feel fragile, investors look for something tangible. That is why money has been flooding into gold. In 2025, gold prices surged, silver reached multi-decade highs, and mining stocks soared. Gold represents something physical in a world built on promises. As debt grows and confidence is tested, real assets regain appeal. The global economy runs on debt, but beneath the smooth surface, pressure continues to build, raising the question no one wants to answer. How long can this cycle last before something finally breaks?